We have a list widget that is just iterating over 3 different widgets, and depending on the type, it's either rendering as a list, as a heading, as a paragraph. We have a couple more to go, right? Maybe an image widget, a link widget. There could be a YouTube widget. There could be any type of widgets, right? There could be a form widget. There could be all sorts of types of widgets. But let's just stick to these 3. So let's add a couple more features, like for instance, being able to remove a widget, right? Or add a new widget. Right? So let's take a look at first adding a new widget. All right, so how do we do that? So here in the widget list component, what we could do is provide a button, right, that would allow us to add a widget, right? And if you remember, components are never going to be responsible for managing their own state, right, or handling any of their own events. Their responsibility is to just notify somebody, right, that this event happened, right, and some centralized controller is responsible to then divvying out all those actions and performing those actions, right? So let's add here a button, right, that says add widget, and there it is. There's add widget, and again, we're not going to handle anything. We're just going to notify somebody that on click, we click this, and we are calling some function add widget, right? And we're not handling. Somebody is going to pass it to us, right? And somebody's going to handle this, right? It's not our responsibility. Okay, so who handles it? Well, that's going to propagate up to my container. My container is going to handle that, and my container is going to propagate it up to the reducer, right? So let's do that. So the container needs to be able to map this property, the add widget property, needs to map it to a dispatcher whose responsibility of the dispatcher is to notify the reducer that something happened. Okay, so to do that, in the container, we're going to add an additional mapper. We're going to say, hey, we're going to have a dispatcher to property mapper. It's going to have the dispatcher. This is the function. This is the function that Redux provides us that we can call it to notify the reducer that something happened, right? And we want to notify it when something happened down in the component. So we're going to return here an object that maps the property here, add widget. It's going to be a function that, for now, let's do something simple. We're going to say just console log add widget. Okay, right? And this becomes also here as a mapper, as the second argument to this. All right. So let's take a look at the console, and let's clear that. And if we click on add widget, it's not calling it. What? Add widget. There it is. Okay, so it is calling it, right? It is calling the add widget. This function we just generated. This function that we just generated. It's being invoked by this add widget, right, which is this property right here, add widget. This and this have to map word for word, keyword for keyword, right? So this is looking at all the properties. Notice that all the mappers, they're all the same. The left-hand side is what? The left-hand sides are always going to be the properties in the component. Yes? And the right-hand side is whatever lives on the reducer side. Yes? All right, so it's mapping between the two. All right, so what are we going to do here? We're going to notify the reducer. We're going to notify by passing it something. We're going to pass it an object, right? Right now, just to show you, instead of doing that console here, let me grab that console. I'm going to grab that console. I removed it. I'm going to call dispatch. I'm going to call dispatch. If I go back to my reducer, we're going to do the console here. We're going to do console log hello from reducer. Okay. So now, if I click on this add widget, oops, it didn't work. What? Actions must be plain object. Oh, okay, sorry. I believe I need to pass it at least an action here. Type whatever. Let's see. There it is. Notice it says hello from reducer. See that? Right? Meaning that whenever I call the dispatch function, basically the dispatch function, the only thing that it does is that it calls my reducer function. It calls my reducer function, it passes it whatever I want. Well, the only thing actually I can ever pass it is passing this action. Whatever I pass, whatever object I pass, in this case I'm passing this type whatever, right, is in this action. And we can print it out. We can say here, print out the action. It is action. Right, so if I run it again, notice that there it is, type whatever. So whatever I pass in that dispatcher makes it into the reducer. Yes? Right? It is then the responsibility of the reducer to interpret that action. Right? Right? To interpret, instead of whatever, I could pass in, something meaningful, something like, hey, create a widget. Right? And then the responsibility of the reducer says, if it's create a widget, then I know that I need to create a new widget. I need to push or add another widget. Okay, so let's do that. So here, instead of doing a whatever, we're going to say create widget. Right? I'm going to create widget, and in here we're going to interpret that. We're going to interpret that, and so we need to do some. We need to fix this a little bit. We're going to fix this a little bit so that before we were always returning the same state. Now it's not going to be the same state. Instead, we're going to add new things, right? New widgets. Yes. So instead of always returning the same thing here, what we're going to do is that we're going to wrap this inside of a switch. We'll look at the action, and depending on the type, this type, right? Depending on that type, we'll do a couple things. For now, let's just have the default here, meaning if it doesn't match anything, I'm going to return just whatever this array is, right? So I'm just going to return that. I'm just going to return. I'm just going to do return that. There we go. Okay, so now we're back to where we were. Nothing has changed. My default is still the same 3 widgets, right? The same 3 widgets because my action doesn't match anything. The default is to return this static array. Yes, right? So this we should interpret it as being the default or initial state. The initial state might be that the widgets is empty. There are no widgets, right? But we can start off with some static list here, and we can maybe put it in here. So const initial state, right? And then we can initialize this right here, the state of if I don't have any state, which is the initial state of any reducers, that there is no state, we're going to initialize it here with being this static constant over here, and then this just returns just a plain old state. Just returns the state. And the first state is to start off with this initial state over here. Let's see if we didn't break anything. Excellent. So we're back where we were. We have the initial state. The only thing that I've done here is that I've moved the hard-coded state, initial state, outside of some const. This could be read from some file. Right? I believe in the assignment I might give you an initial state of a list of a couple of widgets from where you can start off. And this might be a good place for you to get started. Excellent. Never mind. Let's now look at the action type. And depending on the type, right, if the type is to create a widget, right, if the state is to create a widget, what we'll do is that we're going to copy over all the old widgets that were there, plus we're going to add a new widget. Yes? All right, so let's do that. We're going to return what? We're going to return the widgets. Is going to be what? It's going to be an array that's going to contain the old widgets, state.widgets, plus a new widget, right? That's going to have a default type of heading, a default size of 2, and a default text of a new heading. All right? Make sense? So I'm generating a new state, which is based off of the old state, right? Plus some little nugget in there, right? So let's try it out, see if this explodes. So if I click on Add Widget, notice that indeed it's adding the new widget at the bottom, right? New widget. I can add any number of widgets at the bottom. Make sense? Yes? Now probably it's complaining. I think before it was complaining that there was no ID. There was no unique ID. I'll leave that to you to fix, right? Yes. The type, yeah, we want to be able to modify and update the widgets on the fly, right? We'll maybe like drop down or something like that, right? Yeah, we'll do that a little later. So we're looking first at create. Let's look at also delete, right? And then perhaps, yeah, we'll do update as well.